Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I'm here today with Sarah Phillipe. Sarah has a passion for restoring health that has taken her along a path from RN to becoming a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, board certified holistic health practitioner, and breast implant illness and detox expert. She believes the solution to reversing breast implant illness is about more than just the explant, and that we all need to take personal responsibility for restoring our health by addressing all of the root causes that contribute to chronic illness. It is Sarah's belief that the body has an innate desire to heal itself if it's given what it needs. And she focuses on teaching women how to unlock that innate intelligence and heal themselves. Sarah says that healing is absolutely possible, and it's about more than the explant. The number one thing stopping someone from achieving their health goals post explant is not having a clear plan that is broken down into actionable steps. And her mission statement is healing is about more than the explant. I believe our bodies were designed with an innate intelligence to self-heal. And she says, I believe we need to take personal responsibility for our health, and that means taking actionable steps necessary to get it back. The greatest medicine is to teach people how to not need it. So today we talked about why Sarah got implants, why so many women get them, what they're chasing, and do they actually receive what it is they think they're going to get out of getting breast implants. We discussed that, the internal work that one might do around self-esteem and validation and accepting yourself. And then we went into what breast implant illness is, what it was like to have that for Sarah and so many other women. We talked about symptoms that we might see if you have breast implant illness, what could be making you sick. Your breast implants could be leaking. You could have capsular contraction. It could be inhibiting your detoxification pathways, causing brain fog, exhaustion, autoimmune disorders. There's so many things that could happen. She said there's not a single definitive test to diagnose breast implant illness. Also, she dispelled the myth that saline implants are always safer than silicone. And we talked about biofilm, if it's a problem for all types of implants, and how we can get that removed from our bodies if we have it. It was very informative, so good today. She knows her stuff. We just talked about all types of things about the body trying to dispel a foreign object, and why and what type of surgery to get if you want to get an explant. And then she just pretty much was talking about how to prepare for surgery and to have support system after surgery. So this was really good if you've ever thought about getting implants or you've ever thought about getting them out. It was a great podcast. So well done today. So without further ado, we're going to dive into this episode with Sarah Phillipe. I'm so excited to welcome Sarah Phillipe to the show today. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here and sharing this important information with your audience. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be very important for everyone that's ever thought about getting breast implants, that already has breast implants, or that has explanted their breast implants. Sarah's got a lot of information today that I think it's very important, because a lot of people get breast implant illness and they may not even like recognize that that's what they're suffering from. They think it's going to be like this dream thing, and instant, like, you know uh, everything, and it doesn't always turn out that way. Can you walk us through uh why did you get implants?
Mhm.
Let's start with that.
Yeah. So I have, always had a desire for larger breasts. And it's something that's always been an area that I felt very self-conscious about. And, for me, it goes back to childhood and just learning from, you know, the people in my family and people around me about what it meant to be a woman, and what you have to look forward to when you become a woman. And that is, developing a certain way. And in our society standards really are that, you're not a real woman, or you're not sexy or beautiful unless you look a certain way, right? And so we
Right.
are always faced with all these images and videos and content of perfect looking women. And we think that we need to attain that in order to be worthy, lovable, valuable in society, right? And that knowledge, that understanding started for me in childhood when my grandmother told me that I would be 4'11" just like her, but not to worry because I would have the Johnson boobs. And so I think that planted the seed in my mind when I was very young, maybe 10 or so, that I needed to have that. And if I didn't end up with that, that would be something to worry about. And, I saw my mom get teased a lot when I was a kid growing up, and just, how she didn't fill out her tops and just, flat chested and all of that. And I didn't want that to be me. I wanted to fit in. And I think that's a lot of what this is about with women, is we just want to fit in, and we want to be
And be
seen.
desired.
Yeah, we want to be desired. And um that didn't happen. I didn't end up with the Johnson boobs, and that showed up
that's
in my
that's
life.
my old last name.
Oh, really?
It's like
Nice.
my maiden name.
Mine too. Mine too. So I ended up, that showed up in my life as I got older, and when I went through puberty and didn't develop the Johnson boobs, I stuffed my bra. I tried to make myself look bigger than I was to get that validation, to get that approval. And even in high school, I always felt very, very self-conscious. And I knew that I eventually wanted to have my breasts done. I knew I eventually wanted implants. And I got into bodybuilding, not on a professional level by any means. This was more of a hobby and, just personal goals I had set for myself. And the more I got into that, and the more I started following all these like really fit, amazing, gorgeous women, the more I had that desire to get those implants, because it would complete, in my mind, from what I thought about myself, it would
Right.
complete me. It would complete my look. It would bring me a level of satisfaction and joy and contentment and self-worth that I hadn't had before.
Did it bring you those
Uh,
things?
no, no. And so I ended up getting them because of that. And it was, of course, this desire started from things that were taught when I was young, and it just kept building and growing in my heart and in my mind. And it was that fitness, more of the fitness lifestyle, that led me to eventually making that decision. So yeah, I had the breast implants placed. I think I was 29 or 30, if I can recall. It was around 2011.
Yep.
Um, and
I
things
think there was a big boom around then, because that's when the Victoria's Secret models kind of came out, and they were all very, at that point, very busty, like spilling out of everything. And
yeah,
it makes women feel pressured that they have to look the same way because that's what's considered sexy.
yeah, yeah. And I will say I idolized those women. I was a subscriber to that catalog.
Right. We're all like, I want to look like that.
Yeah, and I did. I wanted to look like them, and they're just so beautiful. And how come I'm not like, I don't look like that? And so there was a lot of self-worth issues I needed to deal with. And where I got my self-worth from was not what really mattered. It was the external outward appearance and how other people perceived me. So
Oh
that
my
was a
gosh,
big
image, right?
image. Yeah, it was
It's
all about
our
the image.
image and how we appear.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely not a healthy way of going about it or a healthy mindset. But it was where I was at the time. And when I had my implants placed, it wasn't love at first sight. That was another thing, is that I didn't know that it was even possible to feel the way I felt after having them placed. But it took me a long time to get used to how they looked, how I looked in the mirror. I cried a lot initially because when I looked in the mirror, I saw a different person. I saw a different body than I was used to for 15 years of my life. And there was a misalignment there, right? It wasn't easy for me to adjust to or accept. And I think that goes in line with how I felt as I was going under anesthesia. In my heart, in my mind, I really wanted these things, but there was a bit of a disconnect in my mind thinking, do I really need these? Is this the right decision? Am I making a mistake? And those are the
I
thoughts
can,
I was having.
yeah, I bet every
As,
woman's thinking that. Like when
yeah.
I bet almost every one of them are wondering if it's the right choice.
Yeah, and that was what I was thinking as I was going under anesthesia. And then of course I woke up and just was like, what did I do to myself? And I did grow to love them. It just took time, but I did grow to love them. And that is why it took me so long to explant eventually down the road. That combined with the fact that I hadn't dealt with the reason I got them placed in the first place. I hadn't dealt with that underlying insecurity and self-worth problem.
How did you deal with that? Because I think that that is such a real thing, whether you get implants or you get your nose fixed
Mhm.
or you have your booty lifted or whatever. I think we all think when we get to that perfect place, we're perfect, that everything's going to be perfect.
Mm,
So
yeah.
how did you like deal with the self-esteem issues, the image issues, and find real like inward confidence?
I think it's a journey, first of all. It's not a quick, there's no quick transition out there to go from A to B with regard to self-worth or confidence. And so for me, it took me, and I know there were a number of times where I was like outwardly processing some of this with people close to me. And for me, it took kind of understanding where the desire or the need that I felt to have larger breasts came from. And it had really not been in my awareness for a long time. I mean, leading up to that point where I was like, where did I get this from? Like, how did I get to this place where I felt like I needed this? And so I did a lot of digging and just looking into, my history and my past and my childhood and all of that, and just kind of sorting through that. And then also there is a lot of growth and self-discovery and learning so about yourself, but also so many different aspects of life and healing and all of that when you're going through a chronic illness type of journey. And so going through all of the struggles that I went through, I I think I sort of kind of uncovered who I really am, without that. And
Who are
where
you
my
really? Yeah.
where my value and my worth
What's
really.
your real identity, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so through that process, I finally got to a place where I was comfortable and confident just deciding to explant. And I think before that, I was still holding on to that like need for validation, that need to feel worthy and sexy and desirable and like I was enough. And I wasn't ready to give them up yet because I hadn't gotten there internally with myself.
Oh my
But it was
gosh.
when I got there, and I don't know how to say like what I did.
Yeah.
It was just kind of working through, for me, it was working through it, within myself. and discovering all these things about myself along the way over years, not over months or weeks. And for someone else, it might look like, utilizing different resources, like, going through trauma therapy, or utilizing a therapist of some kind, or doing something like mind, body, spirit release, or emotion code, or different things like that, where you can really dive into, all right, what's really going on underneath it all? And for me, I didn't need all of that. And I do use some of those tools and techniques now because I know about them now. But back then I just used what I knew. I did what I knew.
What are some of the tools and techniques that you use?
So I think now, you can certainly talk through, where did this come from? Where did this desire, this need, this hole really come from? Where you feel like you need to fill, right? That void or whatever it is. Where did it come from? I think that can be talked through and discovered. And then as far as processing and being able to release some of that and heal from that, every person is going to find a different modality is more beneficial than another. And so there are a lot of resources and tools out there. Like I said, emotion code and body code are wonderful. Mind, body, spirit release is wonderful. Breath work is so wonderful, because so much of what we go through in life, the emotions we experience, if we don't know what to do with those, they can become trapped and stored in our body and our tissues, our organs, and impact function. And I think the more we can learn about where our stuff comes from, the more we can start to unpack it and heal and move forward. So tapping into some of those tools is really helpful. Another one is somatic experiencing, which traditionally was designed for dealing with PTSD, but it can be helpful for dealing with anything that's triggering for any reason, not just PTSD. And a lot of us are dealing with PTSD-like symptoms as a result of all the gaslighting we've experienced. Going from
Okay.
one doctor to the next, telling us that nothing is wrong with us, it's all in our heads, and we should
Mm.
seek counseling.
Oh my gosh. It's so good. Well, I love that we dealt with that because I think that's actually like a big part of everything. Why like as far as you decided to get them out, can you walk us through what breast implant illness is and how would somebody know they have it? What was it like for you?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I generally try to explain this in a couple of ways because it doesn't always look the same for every person. Sometimes people discover breast implant illness and they think, well, I've had my implants for decades and never had a problem. Why would I all of a sudden have a problem? And for some people, it's the other way around. So for me, I started experiencing symptoms within a matter of 6 months or so. And for some people, it's right away. And for some people, it could be years or decades later. And so in my mind, it's typically never just one thing causing someone to develop a chronic illness or chronic illnesses. It's usually multifactorial. And the breast implants are a part of that picture. And
Mhm.
when someone's dealing with chronic symptoms or chronic health issues, the breast implants should come out. That's one stressor on the body that we need to remove. But then there might be others. For me, I had all kinds of unhealthy lifestyle habits that set the stage for the eventual fall. And for me, the breast implants were the trigger or the straw that broke the camel's back, but they weren't the only thing that was in my life or in my body that was fueling that inflammatory fire. I had, worked night shift for 5 years as a nurse. That is incredibly stressful on the body. I was killing myself at the gym, pushing myself beyond what is a normal, healthy capacity, and really suffering as a result of that. I had a really unhealthy relationship with food where I would starve and binge and starve and binge as I was going through cycles of building muscle and then cutting fat and then building muscle and cutting fat. And I didn't have like this type of knowledge that I have now back then. So for me, a skinny cow ice cream sandwich and a protein bar or a protein drink was lunch. If it fit my macros, that's all that mattered. right? And so it wasn't a healthy way of eating. And I was also, having a good time drinking and, whatever felt good to me, I did. Really unhealthy diet at work, hamburgers and french fries and candy bars and soda and chips every single night I worked. And then sometimes I would drive home and pick up breakfast from Burger King on the way home. And I was going to bed right after that.
So it was almost like a desperation in a way, right? Like I mean, it's like we're in this thing where we're desperate to be loved and accepted and
Yeah.
appreciated and acknowledged and all of these things. How can, we seek that out in a different way other than working out ourselves to death
Yeah.
and starving ourselves to death and getting the biggest boobs on the market?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that, you know, there are other scenarios where someone may have not been beating themselves up quite as badly as I was, or maybe they didn't have a lot of stressors in their life leading up to getting the implants, or maybe they just have a stronger genetic potential for being able to cope with more or handle more. But at some point, there can be something in their life, whether it be a traumatic event or a car accident, a divorce, a loss of a loved one, a root canal, like whatever it may be, that could be the straw that broke the camel's back. And either way, I think it can be a really tricky puzzle for people to put together for themselves. And regardless, in my mind, the implants are a part of the picture and need to come out. And I don't think now, looking back, even if you're someone who doesn't have any problems and you have implants and you're doing well and you're thriving in life, I still don't think it fits into a healthy way of living. And
Because
so,
it's basically fake bags that you've put in your body,
mhm.
and our body is not meant to have that inside. So I think like your immune system is going to try to spit it out in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, think of it like a splinter. Like your body wants to push that out and get rid of it because it knows it doesn't belong there. It's the same thing with implants, except your body can't push it out, and so it forms a capsule around the implants to protect the body from those implants, but it just doesn't do a very good job of protecting us. And so to go back to your question, breast implant illness can present in so many ways and it can look different from one person to the next. And the symptoms can really cross so many lines of other diagnoses that it's really hard to say if it's the implants or something else. But like I said, from my perspective, the implants are always a part of the picture. And there's no test for diagnosing breast implant illness. There's no like testing you can do to determine whether it's the implants or not. There is an image, so MRI can be done. And there is a doctor in, I want to say it's Spain, but I can't recall for sure. His name is Dr. Fleury, and he has developed a method for interpreting the MRI. And he can, if you send your MRI to him, can interpret it to look for silicone-induced granuloma of the breast implant capsule. So it is thought that this silicone-induced granuloma that can form is the trigger for the chronic symptoms that develop, and that is the diagnostic tool for breast implant illness. I don't have my clients go and do that MRI because most of my clients are already explanted by the time they come to me and they're not better. But if you are someone who really needs more validation to be able to confidently make that decision, that could be one avenue you look into. And so there's this chronic immune response happening, right? And then that's in addition to the toxic load that the breast implants pose to the body and a number of other issues, of course. But we can experience things like fatigue and brain fog and difficulty learning new information, poor word recall, anxiety, depression, hair loss, skin issues, rashes, hives, mast cell activation, dysbiosis, and gut symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, gas, bloating, insomnia, what else, intolerance for chemical smells and bright lights and loud sounds, and anything that's stimulating. Really, it's overstimulating the nervous system. People can have a hard time breathing, they can develop thyroid problems and hormone imbalances, and it just is this snowball effect throughout the body. So there is really no symptom that couldn't be attributed to breast implants, possibly.
What increases like a person's susceptibility to like getting breast implant illness? Because some people don't, and they're pretty happy with them, and other
Yeah,
people just are like fatigued and tired, and they're bloated, and they're suffering from like weight gain and all sorts of
yeah,
things.
yeah. And I think that's a really hard question to answer because there haven't really been many studies around this topic. There aren't enough anyway to be conclusive about it. I would say, and I don't want to get into blaming genetics because I think that is just one little piece of the puzzle, and the epigenetics are far more important. So, but when I look at genetics, what I would say is in my client population, what I see most often is um, defects in the genes that influence glutathionization. So glutathione production and metabolism and utilization and all of that, and recycling, and methylation defects, and how someone's sulfur pathways are working, just all of those detoxification pathways, biochemical detoxification pathways that can impact someone's ability to handle more toxic load than another person. So that's, I think, a part of it. In addition to that, it's not just the implants. We're dealing with the most toxic time in history. We're living in the most toxic time in history. So the implants are one drop in the bucket. And what else are we exposed to? A lot in our daily lives. So someone who is expressing symptoms versus someone who's not may have a lesser genetic potential for dealing with those things, or their genetics may be such that they have a much more easily dysregulated immune response, let's say.
Yeah.
And it could even be that the implants are an epigenetic factor turning on certain gene expression, kind of like how we see with mold and chronic inflammatory response syndrome. You can have the
Yep.
genes for it, but that doesn't mean you're going to be sick.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you'll ever be sick with mold if you're exposed to mold. It requires a trigger, right? It requires something to prime that gene to turn on and start expressing. So I would say, we know a little bit about that with regard to mold. We don't have that kind of information regarding breast implants. But this is just my best educated guess. Is as far as like, why would someone do worse or better? I think there could be a little bit of a genetic involvement there. And what are all the other epigenetic factors that could be playing a part there?
Now, how would we know that we're leaking? If you've got like breast implants, how do you know that it's leaking?
Mm-hmm.
Just gets smaller, or would you not even know?
So a rupture and a leak, of course, are different. Rupture is a more acute situation versus a leak is more chronic. It's like a slow ongoing leak into the body. And, say there's silicone and saline implants. They both have different properties to them. Silicone, the old silicone implants used to be liquid. And so when you had a rupture, you knew it, right? It would just, one would be totally deflated. There can be leaking, of course, too. And then you have the new silicone, cohesive silicone gel implants, which if you had a rupture, you wouldn't know it necessarily because you're not going to lose volume because the gel kind of sticks and stays where it is. The saline implants also, if you have a rupture, you're going to know it because you're going to lose that volume. It's liquid. If there's leaking happening, you may just see a slow change in size over time where maybe you see some unevenness between the different breasts and you feel like something is changing, and that could indicate a slower leak. In addition to that, the newer silicone implants that are cohesive gel we call it gel bleed, but it's really more of like the shell breaking down over time and the contents of what's in the shell and what's behind that, what's in the implants leaking out into the body. And that can happen at body temperature. They've never really tested these implants in a person. They've done rat studies where they left them in for 3 months. And what's going to happen in 3 months? Usually not a lot. They really haven't done long-term studies on these
That
implants.
doesn't sound good. They put them in
Right.
rats first. It just doesn't sound good at all. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And so when you heat, it's like when you heat up plastic, right? We don't heat up plastic. We've learned that lesson because it's going to bleed, it's going to leach into our food and our
Well,
beverages.
I heard that you couldn't sit in an infrared sauna that was very warm because it could cause problems if you have implants.
I think it accelerates the rate of bleeding. Yeah. And I think it all depends, you know, for someone who's really struggling with their health and symptoms. And if they feel better in an infrared sauna and they still have implants, I say go for it. If you feel
I
worse
think it's
and
if
you
it's
have
a
implants,
really hot, like a hotter on the hotter side, not like
yeah.
not at temperatures 140 and below, but like a lot hotter.
Yeah. And it is regardless of whatever the thing is you're doing, if you feel worse, you shouldn't do it. You know, the goal is not to feel worse. Um,
Right.
it just shows me that the bleeding of the contents of the implants is happening at a rapid rate, and your body can't process all of that. So, you know, that's what's happening when someone feels worse when they use a sauna and they have implants. So it's a case by case basis. And I really think someone needs to work with a practitioner or their doctor with regard to that.
Now these implants can get molded, right?
Yeah, that's another problem with saline implants. So generally speaking, people tend to be under the misconception that saline implants are safer than silicone. However, there are a couple of issues with saline implants. One, they have a silicone shell. So you're still exposed to silicone, and silicone is a neurotoxin. It can bind and chelate your neurotransmitters. It can end up in the blood-brain through the blood-brain barrier. And it's not just this exposure. Silicone has become pervasive in the environment. We're exposed to silicone in all kinds of different ways. And so it's this bioaccumulation that's happening just like with plastic. The other problem with saline implants, like you said, is that they can harbor and grow mold within them. They can also harbor other organisms, different fungi, different bacteria, viruses, things like that. What happens is there is a valve in the saline implants that should be one way, used to fill the implants once they're placed. Either there can be a couple things that happen. Either the valve can be defective upon implantation, it can become defective over time through just user wear, or it could have a trauma that impacts the integrity of that implant that doesn't necessarily result in a big rupture, but it could impact the integrity of the valve. And so then you have fluid going in and out of the implant, and it could be fluid from the fascia, from the lymph, from that surrounding tissue, essentially. And the breast tissue is not sterile. We have all kinds of bacteria in our mammary glands and, you know, in the lymph surrounding that tissue, and that can make its way into the implants. And in addition to that, the membrane, the structural integrity of the not the capsule, but just the shell surrounding the implant itself, it is not completely closed. So it is a little bit more semi-permeable, I would say. So things can get through. And the capsule that we build, that our immune systems build around the implants, are also not perfectly closed. When you look at them under a microscope, they're more lace-like. They have holes. And so things can get out, get into all that dense lymphatic tissue and travel throughout the body. So it's not, even if you have a small leak or a bleed, it's not just bleeding into the breast tissue, it's getting systemic. So you can have, you know, like I said, organisms getting into the saline implants, and it's a petri dish, you know, and it grows within that medium. And if you're someone who's living in a moldy house, as an example, that's where it can come from. And easy enough to, you know, get out of your house if that's the case and move, not as simple to address something that is living and growing inside of your body, right? That has to be physically removed.
Goodness. Yeah. I mean, it's this very informative today. You were talking about the salines. People thought they were a safer option, but it's not necessarily true.
Mhm.
Um, is biofilm a problem for both types of implants? And can it remain in the body after surgery?
Good question. Biofilm, we're finding, is a very significant problem. And, you know, whenever there are imbalances in microorganisms in the body or pathogenic infections in the body, those organisms will build and create biofilm around themselves to protect themselves from the immune response. This tends to be an area where it's constantly triggering an immune response, right? It's the foreign objects are sitting right there, ongoing and constantly 24/7 triggering an immune response. And of course, whatever organisms are there are going to want to protect themselves against that immune response, and building biofilm is part of that protection. And the importance of dealing with that, or the way in which you would deal with that, is at least in part by removing 100% of the capsule that's formed around the implant. So that's a really important part of the procedure, is to get all of the capsule out, because those organisms can be in the capsule as well, with, intertwined within the matrix of the capsule. In addition to that, of course, the silicone and the other contaminants can be interwoven within that matrix as well. So it leaves, if you're not getting the capsule out, you're leaving the thing in the body that's still exposing you to the harmful microorganisms and other toxic compounds that have basically become a part of that.
Does insurance support getting the capsule out? Or do you have to pay for the surgery of explantation and the capsular contraction all on your own?
So from what I don't know a lot about insurance,
Okay.
because when I explanted, insurance did not cover any of this. And I don't think they still do, unless, so the qualifications, and every policy is different. That's what I'll say. So if you're
Yeah.
wanting to know if your insurance will cover it, you need to call your insurance company, because everyone's policy is different. For me, what I realized is that my insurance wouldn't cover it unless I had gotten the implants due to a mastectomy, or I had developed a stage 3 or 4 capsular contracture. And even if it had covered the explant, most explant surgeons who are highly skilled and do this every day and believe in breast implant illness do not bill insurance. They operate on a cash pay basis. And that's because, insurance doesn't reimburse for the time that it takes someone to do a very thorough job. And that's if they even reimburse, right? Because most of the time it's going to be a no. So, there's a lot of different variables here. And I would say in most cases, insurance isn't going to participate in that.
I think it's just good for people to know that it's going to be somewhat expensive when they go. It could be more expensive to keep them in, because if you lose your health, but it's going to
Yeah,
be a little pricey to get things put back the way they were before, right?
it is, because first of all, well, here's what I would say. If you're worried about the cost, think about it this way. Implants are not lifetime devices. They need to be replaced some surgeons say every 5 to 10 years. So if you were told these are fine to be with you for the rest of your life, you were misinformed. They do need to be replaced. And so the cost of replacing them every decade minimally, think about that, how that adds up. And then in
That's
addition to
perfect.
that, the cost is so much greater to have the explant surgery, because there's a lot of reconstruction that occurs as well. It's not just like a simple, let's take them out, like you would get if you went back to your surgeon who put them in. If you go to a really skilled explant surgeon, where that's the majority of what they do, they're going to do the absolute best thing for you. And they're going to take their time and be very diligent, get it all out, and do it on block, which is removing the implant and the capsule together as one physical structure, so that they don't cut open the capsule and risk, if there's some kind of silent rupture, the spillage of all of that content into your body, into your chest cavity, and then the lymphatics, right? So there is a right and wrong way of going about it. And if it can be avoided, if it can be done, I'll just say it that way, on block should be performed. And then regardless of whether it's on block or not, 100% of complete capsulectomy is necessary. And, there's reattaching muscle, there's a lot of reconstruction things that go on during that surgery. So it is a lot more expensive. My surgery was twice what I paid to get them in.
Right, right. And there's also, if you're leaving them in, you could get some kind of a problem like with your immune system because
Yeah.
it's a foreign object in your body and your body keeps trying to expel it. And
Yeah.
so like you're gonna create this over immune response.
Mhm. Yeah, you can have some different immune dominance happen, and that can lead to the expression of autoimmunity. Absolutely. I had developed Hashimoto's when I had my implants placed. And that was pretty quick. That was one of the first things that developed for me.
Okay.
So we see that a lot. Things like rheumatoid arthritis,
Mhm.
Hashimoto's, Graves, different, all kinds of different autoimmune conditions, essentially.
And sometimes I think people are like, "Oh, that's probably not causing my problem," but I would say it could like be like up there with the
Yeah, it
the
could at least be
causes.
part of the problem. Yeah, it might not be the only
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. So moving on to explant surgery, um, like what type of surgery, first of all, do you think is the best one? I mean, I know there's fat grafting, there's different ways to go about it. What would you recommend having done this yourself?
During the explant, is that what you mean? Yeah. So as I mentioned, the term en bloc is really important. So en bloc is really more of a cancer term, but we use it in this space as well because it describes what we want to accomplish, which is the removal of the implants intact with all, still inside the capsule, basically. So we don't want to disrupt the capsule because we don't know what is lying underneath there. Is it ruptured? Is it not? Are there infections present within the capsule? We just want to avoid that risk if we can. It's not always possible, of course. So that's best case scenario. And then all of the capsule needs to be removed. And sometimes, especially when you have the implants placed under the muscle, there can be a lot of adhesions and adherence to the rib cage. And so having a very skilled explant surgeon is really important because of that, because most surgeons, especially the ones who placed your implants in the first place, will not remove the capsule, nor do they find it necessary. They'll tell you, oh, the body will just absorb that on its own. And that doesn't happen. And so we do want to have all of the pieces of the capsule removed, and sometimes that involves scraping the ribs, and not everyone is going to be comfortable doing that because it is risky, that there's a very thin little layer of fascia between the ribs protecting your body from puncturing or protecting them from puncturing the lung, right? So not a lot of tissue between the ribs and the lung. So there is that risk there, and that because of that, another reason why you want someone who's done a lot of these explant surgeries and is very skilled.
And that could be dangerous, right?
Yeah, you don't want to end up with a pneumothorax or some other kind of really significant complication.
Yeah, because like I mean, they could puncture your lungs,
Yeah,
right?
that's a not a good scenario. So
Yeah.
So, and then whether or not someone has a lift or fat grafting or things like that during the explant surgery is another decision to make, right? For me, I decided I was young enough, I had good skin integrity, good enough collagen production. I had never breastfed, I had never even had a child yet. So I didn't really feel the need to have a lift. So I didn't have a lift. I decided against that, but I did have a fat transfer. And I would say if you want to have a fat transfer for whatever reason, wait until you're healed from your explant surgery. Do it in a separate surgery because your body's already going through so much. It's already inflamed. And when you're inflamed, you're not going to retain that fat. And that's what happened with me. I had, lots of liposuction and fat grafting, and it didn't stick. It ended up kind of, being dissolved by my body. And that was a lot of money down the drain. In addition to the fact that you're disrupting all the fascia and you're disrupting the lymphatic tissue and how that is going to impact drainage for you. All the scarring and adhesions that develop that you might not even see or feel or know are there, but they're impacting the flow of energy and the flow of everything in your body.
What would you like to tell anybody out there that is considering getting implants or already has them?
Or already has them. So whew, for people considering implants, I would say, I wish I had done some of that internal work on why I felt the need for that. And, really discovering who I truly am on the inside. I probably would have made a different decision if I had done that work before. So maybe think about, definitely be informed, take it upon yourself to do the research and know what you're getting yourself into and what the risks are for you. And then in addition to that, um, consider diving into, tapping into, why do you feel you need this? And seeing how that, what do you unpack when you start asking that question? What comes up for you? And, where does your worth really come from? And if you have a hard time with this, start asking people around you who love you. What is it that you love about me? What are my values? What are my assets? What is, so great about me? And then that can help you start to think about it in that way and say, oh yeah, I am all those things, for someone who already has them and is, considering whether or not to explant, I would just say, it's a really hard decision to make. It was for me too. So I understand you. I've been there. I get it. Still, same thing. Do the inner work like I did. And consider how it's showing up in your life. How is staying in the place that you're in, wherever it is, whether it's sick or just dealing with a few annoying symptoms, how is staying where you are having a negative effect in your life? If it's negative enough, if you're hurting enough, you're going to be able to make that decision to change the thing that's causing the downstream effects, causing a lot of the symptoms, right? You're going to be able to have an easier time making that choice. And so I think that's what it boils down to for most people is, are you hurting enough to get them out?
Yeah. What changed for you once you explanted? What did you learn about yourself?
Um, so after I explanted, I didn't notice a huge shift for myself right away. I mean, the shift that I noticed was I felt I could finally take a deep breath. I didn't have pain anymore. I had a lot of rib pain because I had adhered, some of them, spots were adhered to my rib cage. And anytime I would lay down, it would pull and be very painful. I always felt like I could never take a deep breath. I had very shallow breathing. I felt like a lot of air hunger and it felt like chest tightness as well. And so I finally felt like I could breathe. I felt like I was less in that fight, flight, freeze place and more calm and gentle and just softer, not so intense. I was very, very intense because my nervous system was so aggravated, and when I got that stressor out of my body, it just relieved a lot of that. And I was able to finally get into a good place. And then the work, I had to do a lot of work after that. And that's what I teach women after their explant is how to heal. And so the work doesn't stop after the explant surgery. There is work to be done. And so just know that going into it, there's no miracle cure for anything. There's no panacea, and having the implants out is not going to be a magic fix for all of your health problems. So I think it's important to go into explant surgery with realistic expectations. And then just knowing that, you can heal your body if you give it what it needs and take away what it doesn't.
This has been so good today. And I hate to run, but I have another podcast right away. So you guys, how can they reach you on social media and maybe get involved with your group coaching program?
Yeah, so on Instagram is the best place to find me because I'm not often on Facebook. So Reversing Breast Implant Illness is my Instagram handle. I also have a YouTube channel that is going to be we're going to be launching something pretty exciting there soon. And that's just my name, actually, Sarah Phillipe. And I'm sure if you typed in reversing breast implant illness, you would also find my channel. So it shouldn't be too challenging to find. And for the group program, there is a link in my bio on Instagram to that, or you can find it on my website, which is also reversingbreastimplantillness.com.
Well, thank you. And we appreciate you coming on the show so much because I feel like this is a hot topic. It affects so many women on so many levels. So I salute you for having the knowledge, the will, the will to take them out, and then taking it further and helping all women out there.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for helping to spread this message and sharing it with your audience. It's just, we need as many people to share as possible.
Oh, yes, 100%. This is a conversation that needs to be like front and center and out there. So make sure you guys, when you listen, you share and you seek Sarah out if you want further help that we couldn't completely finish all the things I might have wanted to ask today. And as always, you guys keep on keeping on. Bye, everybody.